Hello and welcome to this course with Groove 3. This course will be about using UAD's Spark collection and all the different plugins available in this collection to do a whole mix. You can also follow along with the DSP accelerator versions as well, because they're an identical version of the plugin if you'd like to run them off of the UAD hardware if you don't have UAD Spark. There will be a few additional plugins as we're going that UAD Spark doesn't currently have, like a de-esser. They'll be using a few things inside of Ableton like stock auto pan devices, but really simple stuff that you should already have a version of inside of your DAW. Additionally, if you'd like to follow along with these videos, you can use any DAW you'd like, and you can actually download a free trial of the UAD Spark platform if you'd like to on the UAD website. I'll also provide this mix session as well, so I'll have my own version of the mix available if you'd like to take a look at it and mess around with it. I'll have a blank session, which is the one you see in front of you here, and then I'll also include all the stems if you're working in Logic or Pro Tools and you'd like to drop everything in and give it a go. So first, taking a look at the song, we have kind of this indie folk track. It almost has a little bit of like a Sufjan Stevens type of vibe to it. It's got drums, it's got acoustic guitars, pianos, upright bass, a couple of different electrics, percussion, and then two different vocal tracks down here at the bottom. Let me just go ahead and just play you a sample just so you can kind of get a feel for it. There's a lot of different layers, and especially on those drums, there's actually a lot of really interesting tracks that we can mess around with. The fun part about this mix and why I chose this record to work on is we actually have quite a few different options as well. We could take this a little bit more ambient and apply lots of reverb just on these elements to help them feel a little bit more dreamy and ethereal, or you can go for more of a pop country sound and play up the snap of those drums and the bass and everything to give it a really nice groove, and they kind of mainly focus on the drums and the vocals. So there's a lot of different fun options here for mixing this record, which is why I selected this track to work on. One thing to note about this though is it was recorded quite well with good microphones and good preamps. This is the way that I would expect a mix to come from a client who recorded in a professional studio, where they use multiple different microphones to record things like acoustic guitars, or use different types of drum mics and room mics as well. Now, if you're working with microphones that aren't super nice vintage mics or ribbons or anything like that, the main thing I'd recommend for you on your mixes to try out is to just play around with mic positioning. It's not necessarily about using the best mics possible. You could take any microphone, and if you're very picky about the mic positioning and the gain structuring inside of your recording, you can actually get really, really good sounds. There's a lot of records that just use the Shure SM7B microphone for vocals, and if you play around with the tone of those microphones, you can get really great results even though they're not an expensive vintage mic. And same thing too with something like a Shure SM57. You can get really amazing piano recordings on an upright grand piano if you just play around with that mic positioning to really dial it in to get the best possible sound. And throughout the course, I'll also give recommendations as well if you're working with tracks that are less than stellar microphones, some things you can do to kind of improve those. So first, let's jump into how this track is organized. This is how I usually like to mix inside of Ableton. First, I create two buses. I have an all music bus up here at the top, then I have an all vocal bus here down at the bottom. And the reason I like to do everything this way is it gives me the ability to quickly adjust the levels of just the music or just the vocals. So if I need to make an instrumental version, I can quickly just mute the vocals, or if I'd like to just work on my vocals, I can mute all of my music. This also gives me the ability to go through and just compress all the music tracks together and leave the vocals all airy and less compressed, or I can go through and bus process all my vocals together, maybe throw even a stereo widener so it kind of meets the stereo width of my main music track in the middle. So there's a lot of different options here for whenever you mix. I just find this gives me a little bit more flexibility and just makes it easier to go through and adjust things. And then taking a look at some of these individual tracks, we have these various different groups that I've created just to kind of organize things. We've got the acoustic guitar, which has two different microphones. We have a piano track, upright bass, lots of drum tracks here, which again I've also grouped. We have a lot of room mics too, which we'll be playing around with a bit later. We have the main guitar bus, which has these two different electric guitars, one on the left and one on the right. Go ahead and just change that color so it all matches. We have guitar solo. We have this percussion track with a shaker and a tambourine. And then we also have our two vocal tracks here, the harmony and the main lead. So let's go ahead and take all these tracks out for now. I'm just going to go ahead and mute them. Let's go ahead and select them, hold shift, select all of them, hit the mute button, and that'll leave us with just this acoustic guitar track. Because really at its core, this song is really just acoustic guitar and vocals. So if we play these both together. I guess
sun don't wake me anymore.
So all the production elements that are around these two parts are basically just sort of reinforcing the song or the song structure. And really all it is vocals and acoustic guitar. So those are the two main elements that we're going to start with first. I'm going to go ahead and start with that acoustic guitar. So that way we just have something to kind of match the vocals to. So that way there's a nice blend between the two different sections. So let's open up our acoustic guitar bus and let's take a listen to both of these tracks. They're pretty similar. It's just two different microphones used to record the same performance at the same time. I have this main one. And then this one that's more of kind of like a room track. Basically, we could just layer those together and treat them all as one recording. And that'll give us a good starting point to work with on our acoustic guitar. So before we start compressing and EQing everything, and starting to sort of mess around with the UAD plugins, let's go ahead and just address some problem areas first. So that way, once we start compressing everything, we're not pressing unwanted resonances into the guitar. That way we get a very natural and open sound. So before we jump into the UAD plugins, let's go ahead and go over to the stock Ableton devices, and I'm just going to grab an EQ8. You could also use something like a FabFilter Pro Q or Logic's built-in EQ, or really anything here. We're not doing anything crazy. All I want to do is just remove an unwanted resonance. So if we listen to this acoustic guitar, it was recorded pretty close to the guitar. You could hear a really nice body on this sound. Not a lot of really bright top end, which is really nice, but there is kind of this upper mid resonance that I don't like the sound of. So let's go ahead and find that. I'm going to go ahead and turn on this headphone icon so I can sort of hear the different resonances and stuff. Let's go ahead and narrow this Q up. Now let's go ahead and find that resonance. I think it's probably somewhere right around here. It's kind of that whistle sound right there at about 278, especially over here. Take a listen to it. It's kind of that weird like boxiness. It sort of has this whistly characteristic to it, which whenever we take that out, see how the guitar just sounds clearer? We're not really losing anything, but that sort of whistly resonance just goes away. We probably don't need to take out quite that much. We could probably dial that back to like -8 or so. Maybe narrow that Q a little bit, just so we focus it just on that problem area. We're not going through and pulling anything else out that we don't need to take out. Okay, so that gives us a really great starting point for the guitar. Now we can go ahead and compress everything so we don't push this resonance into the main sound and just make it super loud. We went ahead and removed that before we add in any compression, so that way everything is just more balanced. So let's go ahead and jump into our UAD plugins. I'll go ahead and double click on that to collapse it. Let's go to the plugins. And the first one we're going to add in is going to be an API channel strip. So that's going to be the API Vision channel strip. This has a bunch of different things on it. The main thing that we'll be paying attention to here is going to be the preamp section, just to give it a little bit of that vintage analog color. And then we'll move over to the EQ to sort of color the sound and shape it how we want. So this isn't a super surgical EQ like what we just did. This is used more for general tonal shaping, which is where API EQs really sound amazing, is whenever you use them for tonal shaping. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and drive this up a little bit, just to get a little bit more color on my sound. So we'll take the line gain here, which is this knob down here. We're going to go ahead and drive this preamp emulation just a little bit more. Now I want to get it pretty close to 0. It could be peaking into like +8 just a little bit. We don't want any crunch here. We're just trying to add a little bit of that saturation. Now let's go ahead and take the output gain down as well. So that way we can actually hear what this is doing. Mainly listen to the transients on the guitar and the pluck of everything and sort of that snap. The API stuff is really good for adding a nice transients to either acoustic guitars or drum sounds. Everything just sounds more full and more balanced and has a bit more of this mid-range presence to it, which is why using preamp emulations can be really great just to add a little bit of flavor to your acoustic guitar tracks.